Over the next 10 years, I think one of the biggest forces for change in the world is going to be something that right now feels like a bit of a lost art. I'm talking about listening. And it sounds so in contrast to what we're always being told, to speak up, to use our voice to drive change. But I think the fact that it feels like a lost art is part of the reason why it's going to be so effective. Like I mentioned, so many of the calls right now are to use your voice, to speak up for justice, speak up for peace, don't be silent, and I have no problem with any of that. I think it's all really important. In fact, I think some of the biggest changes that have happened, that are happening right now, can be traced to all these calls to contribute your voice and to join them with the voices of others. I'm thinking about the public sentiment towards Gaza. You've seen that really shift over the past few months. Over the past few years, I think you see a lot more climate action take place that can be directly linked to the increase of climate protests, especially from students and young people. Speaking up is extremely important. It'll continue to be important. This is a platform where I definitely advocate for that. But communication is a two-way street. And one thing that's gotten really de-emphasized in the past decade or so has been listening. What you could already see right now in the world are a lot of leaders, some who I think are good, some not so much, but a lot of leaders who've risen to their position, who've risen to their level of power and influence because of their ability to reflect other people's concerns. In a way, that's listening. They've gained popularity because they're able to put into words the things that a large group of people who have felt unheard, they're able to take those feelings and give words to them, to give life to them. These people who felt unheard suddenly feel like, oh, somebody gets it. Somebody is listening. Somebody is paying attention to me. And that starts to coalesce in this person's influence. Again, you have examples of people around the world who have used this for good and people who have used it to do harm. But the dynamic is real. That moment when your unheard grievance finally gets heard, finally seems to land with somebody, it is such a relief. Now, if you look at any hot button topic today, one where any conversation about it just seems to provoke a whole lot of anger, you'll find people who feel like they haven't been heard. As somebody who tries to believe the best in people and often believes the best in people, a big challenge is reconciling that practice with the reality that there are just masses of people who support ideas and candidates and things that are just a hard no for me. One thing that's helped me understand that a little bit or incorporate it is a sign that I saw when I was a substitute teacher in a middle school classroom. It said the kids who are the kids who are most in need of love will ask for it in the most unloving ways. I think a lot of people who've had their suffering, their oppression ignored for so long will seek it out in ways that often bring injustice onto other people. See, as an emotion, anger is something that signals to ourselves that our sense of right and wrong have been violated. So even if people are being angry in an irrational way, even if their anger is misdirected at something, it does mean if you dig deep enough, you will find a sense of justice that has been violated somewhere. I think if you're able to practice the discipline of listening, to hear that out, even if you don't agree with it, even if you don't agree with it within the proper context, what you're doing is you're giving that person a chance to diffuse some of that anger. This brings people out of their reactive state where, hop on the internet and that's where most people are most of the time, it feels like. But it moves people out of that reactive state into a more rational state. If you've ever had toddlers in a meltdown, you'll know there's a certain level of cooling down that needs to happen before you can reason with a person. And adults are like that too, So we've just learned how to compartmentalize it, and sometimes, especially when we're online, we take that compartmentalizing off. Now, I'm not suggesting we should just go and give a platform to every crazy person with ridiculous ideas. There are plenty of those sorts of podcasts to go around already. In fact, I don't think the place where we're going to recover the art of listening is going to happen on a podcast or a big stage or anywhere in this mass communication, large audience realm. I think you're going to see that recovered in one-on-one conversations, in face-to-face settings, in smaller groups. Part of the reason why listening has gotten out of fashion is just we're out of practice, you know? And it's low-hanging fruit, but I think you can accurately assign some of the blame to social media. But also how society seems to reward those who just have a lot to say. There seem to be greater rewards, greater prospects out there for people who speak versus those who listen. There's also probably a sense that listening is at best a passive action, and that can't possibly generate all the change we're pushing for, all the change we need to see right now with such urgency. Listening just seems like, okay, we hear you, and then what? Then what happens? You know, it's hard to connect the dots to how that could lead to change the way speaking out and demonstrations and rallies could. Well, a couple things. First, this puts a premium on those who effectively know how to listen, because it's becoming clear fewer and fewer people seem to have that skill down. So if you can provide that to someone else, you're always going to have somebody who can readily take you up on that. Creative change makers who incorporate listening into their activism, into their creativity, they're also always going to find plenty of opportunity because of that need. I also have to note that even though listening might feel passive, it's really not. There are plenty of real-world examples that show that this is a big driver for change. One of my favorite examples, and I forget the name of the actual org, I should probably look it up, but there was an LGBT rights group that did a practice called deep canvassing during an election year. Deep canvassing is when you're talking to people, you know, you're like most canvassers, you're interested in moving their opinion, but your strategy for it is totally different. You're not actually in the moment persuading anyone. Instead, you're just asking questions and listening and asking follow-up questions. And there was like a rule, like you just have to keep asking questions, right? No actual like trying to make an argument. Well, they did this, and their data found that this was the most effective driver at changing opinions in favor of LGBT rights. They also witnessed a lot of people kind of work through their beliefs in real time, reconciling messy parts and landing at a more open-minded state. I've been nudging the teams I work with to better incorporate listening as part of their communication strategies, whether that's giving their audiences more of a platform to respond with their own suggestions, their ideas, to incorporate themselves as part of the work. Maybe that means using more forums where people can submit their ideas. You know, with nonprofit organizations, I often remind them that your supporters are invested in the cause you're working on. So ask them for their ideas, things that they might want to see implemented to make a difference. People have a lot of opinions, and having a chance to share it and to be part of that process that way is a great invitation. You don't have to take all their advice, you know, it might not be right, but you can at least give them the opportunity to be heard. So there's not really a strategy to become a better listener, to have this skill instantaneously. You know, if your listening is not sincere, then it's not really listening. And so that's why I can't say just do this, do these 2 things, 3 things, and you'll have it down pat. You know, it's more like cultivating some inner traits, and being a better listener will come naturally. I'm talking about things like curiosity. If you're a curious person, you're going to want to know more about the people in front of you. If you are concerned about them, if you have compassion for them, you're going to want to know what's on their mind. If you build the attribute of humility, if you, just don't see yourself as someone with all the answers, that's going to inevitably make you a better listener. Becoming an intentional listener is a huge asset on the way to becoming a creative change maker. Work on this skill. It's going to be so in demand in the years ahead. All right, talk to you next time.